Welcome to Elementality today. I'm your host, Abby Morton, here with Carl Richards. Welcome, Carl, to the
Abby,
show.
so great to be here in the new Elementality studio.
We've done a big redesign.
Those of you that are just listening, it's beautiful.
A big project. I have to say, this was not intentional for those that you are watching online, but one of my coworkers the other day said, we brought in a mini Carl couch.
Oh, look at that.
And now you're here sitting in it.
This is the blue chair.
I didn't even think about that.
Perfect.
It works great.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about how can we power up our marketing efforts to make and use assessments that we provide with Elements to make those marketing efforts better, right? How do we help advisors demonstrate their value? And there's so many different marketing tactics that advisors do day to day, right?
Yeah.
And so this specific one I wanted to talk to you about is this idea of breakfast meetings.
Yeah.
You mentioned this hey, Abby, I could really talk a lot about breakfast meetings. And I'm thinking, what's breakfast meetings? So let's start high level. When you say I've used breakfast meetings in your past, what does that even mean?
Yeah, super fun conversation because this idea, like many of the ideas that I've used for marketing, was not my idea, right? I started this habit probably 20 years ago where I started thinking about if I had a problem I needed to solve, I would think about I don't need to come up with the solution. Who has the solution? So I started asking clients.
Yeah.
Hey, if you were me, I would like more clients just like you.
Okay.
If you were me, how would you go about it? And that's a conversation I think we'll have for another episode.
Yes.
But one of the ideas that a client came up to, and I remember who it was Jerry. Jerry was like, gosh, that's such a good question. If I was you, and Jerry was of Tom Brokaw's sort of greatest generation. Mm-hmm. So he said, I remember my dad. I remember my dad used to go to these breakfast meetings, and there was 8 to 12 people, and they met in the local cafe.
Yeah.
And every month they exchanged business ideas. He's like, I used to love that. If you would hold a breakfast meeting, I think I could invite 6 to 8 people myself.
Oh.
And you just come and talk. And I was like, well, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, let him do all the work, right? Of getting the people there for you.
Yeah, so that's where the idea came from, and I'm sure we'll talk deeper tactically about it. But what it ended up being was once a month, and I think there's some tactics we need to talk about around the idea of once a month and how do you do it. But once a month, I went and booked, and I did the same place. Actually, I went there and booked it for 6 months.
Okay.
Committed for 6 months, so that I knew I would do it again. It was a place it had a private room that would seat 8 to 12 people. And every month, I would invite clients using the way that you communicate with people. It's called email. I would send an email to my email list and say, "Hey, I'm having this breakfast meeting," and we would pick a topic, and either I would I would speak to the topic, or I would invite somebody else. So if it was tax time, I could invite a CPA to come talk, or if it was something about something specific to a niche, I could invite somebody who had specific ideas for a niche. So it was, the whole goal of it though was just to provide value. I just wanted everybody in the room to feel smarter, more prepared to make good decisions with their money when they left than when they came in. So that's the idea behind a breakfast meeting.
So when you talk about this breakfast meeting, it seems very similar to doing a workshop or a webinar, which you would think is more during the day or in the evening, you host a dinner. Do you feel like there's some appeal to the fact that it's a quote unquote breakfast meeting first thing in the morning? Did you feel like it performed better than maybe hosting a dinner in the evening would have done?
It's such a great question. Yes.
But why?
Super intentional. First of all, I found, and I think this is generally true, and most people listening I think will relate, everybody seems to love breakfast, but nobody ever has time for it.
I gotta say, it's my favorite meal ever.
I think everybody loves it, and you're like, oh, but I just grabbed some oatmeal on the way out. You never have time,
you're running out the
whatever.
door.
So I found that people love the idea of oh, yeah, I'm going to go have breakfast. People love that. The second thing I found with breakfast is it was way less hectic. Then as your day goes on, you seem to lose more and more control.
Yeah.
Right? Lunch was a little better. Dinner was the day got away from me.
Right.
Oh, I got to run home. Plus, most of my clients and most of the people listening, your clients, unless you work solely with retirees, people are busy. And even retirees are busy.
Right.
But it's if you have kids at home and soccer and the dance recital and the whatever, like an evening just doesn't work. And I was also trying to put a little distance between me and the steak dinner.
But why?
Well, because the retirement plan steak dinner seminar scene was just not, that used to be a thing that was heavily used by the annuity sales.
Maybe it's overdone, right?
Like annuity sales folks. Yeah.
You're trying to be different, right?
And so but the biggest thing for me was people had time. So we would do it at like, as I recall, we met at 8 and you were out by 9:30.
Okay.
And you had breakfast. So you still were like a little late to work, but it wasn't like, it didn't really infringe on anything. For many people, it was like that 9:30 was still a fine time to arrive at work.
Totally.
And nothing got in your way yet. You weren't overwhelmed by emails. And I found there was a little bit of a joy in the idea of just, there was one last thing. Breakfast is way cheaper. Way cheaper than lunch and dinner.
The budget's like that, yeah.
Yeah, way cheaper. So you could even do the first couple. I remember we just did continental breakfast. Like it wasn't even like a big thing, but a buffet style breakfast is way cheaper than lunch or dinner.
Okay.
So that's why breakfast.
You know what? You brought up some great points that I didn't think about, and maybe the biggest reason to try it is like the day hasn't gotten away. I know at Elements we've tried a number of dinners. Right, we're at conferences and events, and we're like, hey, let's host this dinner in conjunction with the Riskalyze conference that we were at, and everyone come to dinner. And when you get people at a conference, they're like there to socialize and do the thing, right?
Yeah.
But when you're getting people just in their day-to-day lives, like you're totally right. It's kids have baseball games and soccer games and things happen and emails come in throughout the day and you just get busy. So that sounds like a very intentional decision and talking through that, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there was an element too of like, imagine you're busy and you committed to going to something at 6:30 and your day gets a little, and you're like, oh geez, like I got to go to it becomes like, oh no, I got to go to the thing.
And you're kind of bugged, right? Like you're bugged that the thing's happening because you
like
don't
you
want to
go. Like you might see value in it and all that stuff, but you're still, even if you're like, that's going to be really valuable. Like, I just want to go home and put on the sweatpants and watch a little basketball or something or hang out with the kids. So you're just like, whereas I actually feel, and I can feel it now, like a little joyful about like, hey, I'm going to go grab breakfast. Like that's a completely different feeling to me. So even if the day doesn't get away from you, you're always, that's why I found that to be,
I like that.
I liked it. It was cheaper. More people came. I did notice we had more people come. Like as a percentage of people who said they would come, the percentage showing up was higher at breakfast than at lunch or dinner.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So something else you said has kind of made me think. You talked about, if it's tax season, you'll invite a CPA, or you wanted to always provide value. Yeah. But what I'm thinking about as an advisor is, but the point of this is to like get clients, right?
Yeah.
So how do you manage like providing value, giving good content, but also like being able to have your plug of like, I can help change your life and like come work with me as your advisor. How did you balance that? That's a
fantastic question because the tension's super real. And I think it's especially real when you're relatively new and you're kind of thinking that way. Mm-hmm. And it took me a long time to detox and decide, what if I just showed them? Like, what if we just provided value? Like, and I should mention one other thing. I remember when Jerry first gave me this idea, I had attended a breakfast meeting, and it was a friend of mine named Spencer who did a breakfast meeting. He did it every month for it's probably over a decade. He charged $25 to come. It was just a business. He would bring in a business, somebody who had something interesting to say. I remember like somebody who'd climbed Everest came and spoke. Oh, cool. So it was it was a much broader idea.
Yeah.
But he ended up with 50 seats. And it was full and waitlisted every month. And people, like lots of business. So it was more like a networking event, but it was just one more idea. I was like, look, that's really interesting. That really works well. So that was one more reason I started the breakfast meeting. But the idea of I always think of like Zig Ziglar at the back of the room. Like we got to have somebody at the back of the room, like with a count, like book your appointment now.
Right.
I just decided to take the opposite approach, which was, and I think this is true for financial planners and advisors, you can't tell people what you do. Most of the words you would use are meaningless, if not offensive.
Right.
Like, you can trust me. Like, I'm a real planner.
Yeah, you said the other day, like, the benefits that someone gets out of financial planning are like these emotional and mental
intangible
things, right? Yes, that's the word used.
Yeah.
Intangible. So it's hard to even describe that, right?
Yeah.
And you would describe it different from someone down the street and from your client that you had next door, right? Like everyone would say financial planning brings them a different value.
Yeah.
And it probably changes as the years go on too.
Yeah, so it's really hard to say, like,
Right.
this is what I do for you. So how could we do this in a breakfast meeting, right? So let's just pick up on the tax thing. We can also talk, I mean, assessments just like turbocharge this because you can literally show people.
So that's what you said is like, well, I would just show them what I did. But when you did this, 10, 15?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
A long time ago, back in the last century.
You said you just showed your value, but how did you do it then? And then how would you do it today? Let's
So so let's just pick up on tax because I don't think I think you can pick a topic for each month, and I like it to be topical, I mean, in October or November is a great tax time because you can say, look, we're actually having this before the end of the year, so you can still do things. So let's say it's tax. Well, it's really easy for you to bring in a CPA who you've seen do. CPAs are really, really good at what they do, and they're terrible at letting anybody know what they do. I mean, nobody's excited about that. Do you know anybody who's like, oh, my CPA is great. Nobody gets excited. But if you can, so this serves two purposes. Number one, you put a CPA in front of a group of 8 to 12 people, they feel really good. And I remember having to clear with the allied professionals that I would invite, like, you do not get to pitch anything. And so what you do is you're asking them questions that demonstrates like, hey, give me some ideas of what you've done with clients in October or November. And they would say something like, oh, well, we've looked at appreciated stock and topped off their donations using appreciated stock instead of cash.
Right.
And then you save on the capital gains tax. And we can say then, well, tell me about the impact that had on the clients. Well, geez, in one case, this saved X. And we could do that with somebody who is a time management expert for dentists, right? Well, in one case, this freed up a whole day for one of my clients. So we're actually just sort of giving a mini case study of the actual benefit that professional had. You're just there as the person showing it. And people, it's not hard. Like, if you had that experience where you're like, oh, Carl exposed me to something that just made a big difference in my life. What I always wanted people doing was almost confused by the grace.
Yeah.
Or like walking out like, there was no pitch. It wasn't trying to because you'll notice people walk into these breakfast meetings, particularly prospective clients, with their hands on their wallet.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're not going to get this from me. There's no way you're going to get this from me. And if they leave thinking, they just made me smarter. And I would actually use that as the invite. Hey, my goal of this breakfast meeting is, I have one goal. It's super simple. I want you to leave more prepared to make good decisions with money than when you came in. That's my only goal. And so this month, we're going to talk about this.
I like that.
Right? So that's how I would think about topically. Do you want to talk a bit about how I would do it now?
Yeah.
That's such a good question.
Let's do that. Thank you. You led right into it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, look, the reality is, one of the things I'm so excited about in terms of the work we do at Elements is the ability to quickly, in a way that I did not have, orient a human client, a prospective client, really quickly around where they are today, using a simple set of objective measures, right? And so I could see you doing a breakfast meeting now. You could do 12 a year, one on each element.
Right. There you go. There's your topics.
Right.
Who's going to run with that first?
Yeah. It's not like zero problem doing that. Now, you could still bring in an allied professional.
Totally.
About that specific thing. Like, I could bring in a mortgage banker.
Yeah.
Right. To talk about debt ratio and how could you do better. In fact, we brought John in today. He's going to talk a little bit about some work he did for one of my clients. Like, John's not pitching. John's just talking about the thing around how could we improve your debt situation. Right. So, and the whole time you've got a visual to orient them around real quickly. And you're simply saying, hey, by the way, if you'd like an assessment, I'm totally happy to do one for you. There's no pitch anywhere in here. And it's really easy once somebody does an assessment to say, hey, I noticed some things. People have been through that training, right? In growth camp or however we've exposed them to it.
Yeah.
Right? To say, I noticed these things, this thing, this thing, this thing. happy to help more. Right.
Right. And I think after several meetings of seeing you like demonstrate your value, show them what you can do, asking good questions, not being this like salesman that's going after their wallets.
Yep.
They're going to come around and say, "Hey, maybe I do want to talk to you,
Totally.
Carl." Right? Like it might take a little bit of time.
We're okay with that. And by the way, I have nothing wrong with sales. Like my version of sales is if you've got something that you think will change somebody's life, you have a sacred obligation to sell the crap out of it.
Yeah.
I'm totally okay with that. But I think the best way to do that is show them over and over and over. And somebody's like, why don't I have one of those yet?
Right.
Like, what do you mean? Oh, wow. It's like being exposed to vital signs the first time.
Yeah.
Like, how do I not know that? So that's how I think the breakfast meetings, and just, I have other tactical ideas that we have to get out. So I'll end there and see what questions you have.
You keep leading into my questions that I'm going right into.
Yeah.
So that's really where I was going to go next is like, let's get tactical. Let's talk about the logistics.
Yeah.
Starting at the beginning, you said you kind of just picked one spot. I like that you said, I'm just going to go to this one spot and book 6 months out. So then I commit to doing this for 6 months.
Yep.
You might not even have to do that. Maybe you could do 3 months, right?
Yep.
It sounded like maybe initially this one friend said, I will bring 6 people.
Yeah.
You probably also then emailed it out to see how many more you could get. But, I assume it starts small and it grows. So talk about that. Like, what do you initially do? Like, what did you do? This friend, he brought his friends. Did you do anything else to invite extra people?
No. So look again. So often we have marketing activities that work so well that we stop doing them because we just sort of forget. And breakfast meetings are one of those things. Like I'm 100% positive that if you did this for 12 months, you would be happy you did it. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly why you would be happy, but I know you would be happy. And so the way I think about it is I didn't want to give myself an out. If you do it for 1 month and it doesn't quite work, you can either decide to quit or you can learn. And the reason why I went to the restaurant and committed, so pick a place, local place, small room. Yeah. I think you're going to want to keep it small for a long time, frankly. I actually like the 8 to 12 number.
Yeah, I think you're going to have more chance to interact with the people and really provide value and them to feel like they're there and an important person, right?
Yeah, I'd much rather do 2 a month at 12 than 1 a month at 24.
Yeah.
And so pick a place, commit to a couple of months. I think 6 months is the right number. The invites, the way I love to, like the invites, because it's small, right? So you've got, for me, I had Jerry who said I'd bring 6 people, and 6 to 8 people, and I think he did. But the next month he didn't.
Right.
So we had to invite people. Well, where do we invite people? Well, we hopefully have an email list. We pull up the email list, and the invite is simple, right? Hey, I hold this breakfast meeting. I do one every month. This month the topic is X. I've only got 8 to 12 seats. We like to keep these small so we can have good discussion. If you would like to come, I'll save a seat for you. And then as the PS, I always did. So one thing I wouldn't do is like your ticket for entry is to bring a friend, right? Like I've seen that.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
Whatever. It feels like a
pressure.
burden. It feels like a burden. But there's a beautiful PS that says, by the way, as I mentioned, I like to keep these small. But if you have a friend or family member that you'd like to invite, I'll always save room for them. Like that's completely different feeling.
Yeah.
One of them you say thank you to, and the other you're like, yeah, like that feels like a burden on my shoulders.
Definitely.
So yeah, it takes, the other big risk is you like don't do the work to get the right people there, and then it ends up being your mom and your sister every single time, and they're like, this is kind of dumb to do breakfast meetings.
Right.
But if you take the right work, and then the last thing I'll mention is thinking about the people in the room. Like this is another super cool tactic, is to think like, oh, John is a dentist and I know Sally is a consultant to dentists and I've always thought they should meet. Maybe I can call Sally and go, hey, Sally, John, there's a dentist I've wanted to introduce you to. He'll be at the breakfast meeting. I think you'd like it too. Why don't you come?
Right.
So you're thinking strategically about, that's why that small group is important, is like, what connections can I make that are going to be
I like that.
compound way beyond the meeting?
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on the breakfast meeting? Any last tips that you would give, or something that would just make it, you feel like, go above and beyond?
Yeah. I don't know if it's the right thing for anybody listening, because I don't know the business, but I do know if you do it and commit to it, it will make an impact for sure. So It was one of my favorite things But I had a lot of favorite things, which we'll talk more about some of the other ones. But I love the idea of breakfast meetings. So thanks for asking.
Well, and I think the other thing to keep in mind is that the point of these next several episodes is to give ideas of what you could even potentially do.
Right.
And every episode is not going to resonate with every advisor, right?
For sure.
There's a reason that we are different as human beings, right? We have different personalities and different skill sets and traits. Yeah. So pick the things that are unique to you. Maybe try to go a little bit out of your comfort zone and try something that's a little challenging. Yeah. I think we're all a little bit surprised at what we're able to do when we're challenged. Yeah. But here's just another idea to give it a shot. I think Carl's given you some great even scripts that you could use in an email. Yep. And find that friend who can help you kind of get it started. And there you go.
Amen, Abby. Thanks.
Thanks.